and Russia proportionally responded by seizing Crimea because the new regime in Kiev was putting their military bases and their presence in the Black Sea was threatening that. So they did not try to annex Crimea. Adam Sumner will most likely point to the Donbass and Lugansk wars that started in 2014, the separatist wars there. Russia did support those militarily, much like the United States supported the Chechnya rebels in the 90s against Russia. And I'm again not justifying that, but just in a realpolitik sense, they were destabilizing what they saw as what was becoming a hostile government to them. And in 2015, when the Donbass and Lugansk republics asked to be annexed into Russia, Russia denied them that. If Russia was on such a path of imperialist expansion, why didn't they take over the Ukraine in 2014? Why didn't they annex the DNR and the LNR in 2015?
Very quickly,
If I can make one really quick
sort
request for Adam, I'll let you. I'm not even going to respond.
Go,
Just a really quick request. If we could, for this conversation, just because I'm a child, if we could go like back and forth on like 1 or 2 points each, that would be so nice instead of laying out so much contestable stuff. Is what I would say. I would appreciate it. But go ahead, Adam.
All right. So the questions are like, why didn't if Russia's imperial ambitions really are like sort of really are the reality, then why didn't Russia annex A, Ukraine, and then why didn't Russia annex B, Donbass, Donetsk and Luhansk? So the first question, why didn't Russia annex Ukraine? Well, they were actually counting with the Ukrainian state collapsing under even the slightest duress, because it really didn't, it wasn't obvious back then that the Ukrainian state will survive, and Russia was 100%, Putin was 100% banking on the fact that the government will just collapse, and then they'll just give the Donbass treatment to the whole country, little people's republics here and there, and then the entire thing just falls back to Russia eventually. But oopsie daisy, they accidentally created a Ukrainian national identity in the process, which has been suppressed for decades by Soviets. So the Donbass area is actually Plan C. Plan A was the whole of Ukraine, and then that, of course, wasn't going to work. Plan B was the so-called Novorossiya project, that's from Transnistria all the way to the south coast, Odessa, Crimea, and then all the way till Mariupol, plus the Donbass, and maybe Kharkiv even. Actually, Kharkiv as well. There was Plan B, but that didn't work either. Only the east remained, so there was Plan C. And the reason at that point, the reason why they didn't annex the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics is because it was more geopolitically, from a realpolitical perspective, it was far more efficacious for Putin to not annex these territories, to use them as these sort of forward bases to destabilize Ukraine and to keep this sort of questionable, sort of contested buffer zone, to eventually try and sort of exert their influence. Back then, federalization was the name of the game. Putin tried to achieve a sort of settlement where the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics will become part of Ukraine as in a federation, where the Donetsk and Luhansk regions have a veto in Ukraine's foreign policy. So as you can see, that would have given Russia essentially control over Ukraine's geopolitical course. So that was the name of the game. This is realpolitik. That's my answer.
Okay, so I just gave. Oh, go ahead, Justice.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, so I just dropped in the article from the Kiev Post, and there's others too, where they call to mobilize forces and to break the Kharkiv Pact, which has that lease I was talking about, and to intervene. Now, the issue with the Donbass, of course, is you have, because of the history of the country, you have hundreds of thousands of Russian civilians living in the region, and as Justice said, after they declared their independence, Russia did not invade. They sent in deniable clandestine forces to help them maintain their autonomy. And there were attacks on the Donbass. A war was launched. And as I said, 14,000 people were killed. And in the meantime, the U.S. government, after overthrowing the government in Kiev, after Yanukovych decided not to take the EU association agreement, there was support for that war, political and otherwise. And once Trump came into office, he started arming the country. And since then, it's become a major security risk for the people in that region. And it's also right on the border of Russia. I'm not condoning any kind of violence, but if this occurred in the United States, say in Mexico, if Russia had overthrown the government and launched supported a war against populations there of Americans on the border, and they were preparing for a war with, or even talking about going in there and just evicting those people and killing them and reconstituting an ethnic Ukraine. That would be something that the Americans would object to, because it would be a major violation of their security. But of course, we're sort of starting at the wrong point. I think that it's important to look at the past and see how this led up. I mean, again, you mentioned Georgia. Now, unfortunately, the issue is that the war occurred after Georgia was promised a Ukrainian membership by George W. Bush against the wishes of Paris and Berlin, and the Georgians were given military support, and it's come out in reports that they were receiving back-channel assurances from people in Dick Cheney's orbit, and they thought they could count on American support. And as Justice pointed out, Sergei Lavrov had already told William Burns that this was a major red line, and Burns had told Condoleezza Rice that no Russian politician, conservative or liberal, and everybody in the foreign policy establishment there, from Putin's sharpest liberal critics to the worst most backwards knuckle draggers in the dark recesses of the Kremlin, I think is basically what he says, would ever accept this. And they were concerned in Ukraine, for instance, that a civil war would break out in the event that the government tried to join NATO. And unfortunately, this is what has been promised, and successive regimes have attempted to do just this. And again, it's in the backdrop of the war against the ethnic Russians.
But why would a civil war break out over NATO membership in Ukraine?
Because the country is largely divided. They're in the Russian-speaking regions in the south and the east. These people were threatened by ultranationalist forces who supported the EU membership and also have been trying to join NATO this whole time. If you look at people like Zelensky, one of the big problems was they never gave up the promise, even when there were negotiations that could have removed that as an obstacle to peace. And they never implemented the Minsk II agreements that the Russians and the Germans and the French and the Ukrainians agreed to.
Okay, wait, just quickly. So yes. So just with regards to your previous point, if there was a civil war in Ukraine, if there was back then a civil war due to the country's NATO membership, who would start that civil war against whom?
Well, again, the ethnic Russians are being attacked. This country has been used as a way to invade Moscow by Western powers.
So the Ukrainian ultranationalists would start a civil war against the ethnic Russians in Ukraine if Ukraine joined NATO in 2014 or earlier.
No, they already did. I'm saying that it was a threat to Russia's security.
Okay, but
Connor,
how's NATO is go ahead.
Yeah, just let me jump in right here. I think that what Connor is quoting is a section from the Niet Means Niet memoir that was written by William Burns in 2008, where he said that he assessed that might be a potential outcome. I'm not necessarily going to stand here and defend that. It may or may not have turned out that way, and it's hard to understand what the then ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Russia, thought was a potential outcome with all the resources at his disposal at that time. To relegate that at this moment, who knows? I mean, what they were thinking about, what he was focusing on then.
I think it's also weird that there's so much hypothetical stuff from Ukraine that we talk about to justify Russian aggression, but then we can't look at actual Russian aggression. So I was curious. So, you mentioned about you said that 3 former Ukrainian prime ministers came out to denounce the Kharkiv Pact. The Kharkiv Pact or whatever. 3 leaders came out and said it'd be a good idea to do it. But when they tried this in 2013, it got shot down in the Ukrainian parliament. I read the thing that you linked. So this wasn't on the table, that Ukraine was ever going to go down and retake Sevastopol and kick Russia out, or they weren't going to renew the lease of the base. The idea that was a fear because there was a news article published that some people were saying they should do it by 3 people that weren't even active in parliament anymore in the Verkhovna Rada or whatever. That's just unfounded, right? Imagine that justification of invading a country because a year ago a piece of legislation to not renew a base got shot down. It doesn't make any sense. I feel like you have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to try to figure out maybe they invaded because of this or that or that. We know exactly why the Crimean Peninsula was taken, and it was because Yanukovych left, and it was because Russia was losing control of Ukraine. That's a very easy that's 3 steps from A to B to see exactly what happened.
Absolutely. And the new government in Ukraine, 2014, was fielding questions or fielding ideas of not extending the leases for the bases and also evicting the Russians. Not in 13, but in 2014.
Sure, but
So I mean,
would
again,
that justify? Let's say
under
that.
the new administration, it was an imminent threat. But really quick to jump back onto Adam's point, he says, let's look at realpolitik in Ukraine about how things could have possibly played out, and then he says Russia absolutely did want to take Ukraine. They were waiting for the Ukraine to fall apart. That's a interesting story that has no basis in reality or
That's what they just did.
we have no
2 months ago.
ability to prove that. You're saying this is what was in the heads of Putin or in the heads of the Russian
Oh, sure.
high
I mean,
command.
on
We
the
have no way to
24th
prove
of
that.
February, they tried exactly this again, but with actual military forces directly. Like, I'm sorry. Have you
All
heard
right,
the news?
but
Like,
the
Russia invaded Ukraine.
24th of February 2022 is not 2014. It's a different time span. It's a different
Yes.
a
Back
whole
then, Russia
different,
tried
a
with
whole different
proxies.
scenario. But just really quick, let's, instead of looking at some sort of ethereal theoretics, let's look at the reality of the situation. Based on the Russians and Americans or the Western play in this thing, as the United States led Western world follows a policy of encircling Russia with active military bases. Russia works a little bit in territories on its border, and who's the aggressor here? Who's expanding military operations?
What is
Who?
what is the NATO
That's
aggression?
the question.
That is
And
the
that's
question. What
the
is-
theory. That's the thing that we have to look at.
What is the
Countries-
NATO aggression? Like, I'm curious. Let's play that thought experiment real quickly. What do we think?
All
is
right,
gonna
Destiny. When was the one time in the NATO history when Article 5 was enacted? One time.
We triggered Article 5 for 9/11. What do you mean?
We triggered Article 5 for 9/11 to invade where? Afghanistan. Halfway around the world, completely out of our sphere of influence, potentially a war that we didn't need to have fought.
Hold
So
on, I'm
as
sorry. Do you
Russia
think that
sees
triggering? Hold on,
NATO
hold on.
countries,
Wait. No, wait. Can we just one point by point, okay? Are you trying to say that Russia might 9/11 us and we'll trigger Article 5 for that? Or are you trying to say that another country might 9/11 us and we're going to Article 5 into Russia? Do you really believe that's a possibility?
I'm saying that as the United States, as the Western world says, NATO is simply a protective, defensive alliance. It doesn't look like that from the other side. It looks like
We don't have to.
find
We
reasons
can look at
and
NATO
use-
missions to see that. But let's engage with the point. I want to hear this. I want to hear the engagement with this point. Do you really think? Do you personally? Do you believe that there is any chance that NATO or NATO forces or NATO countries are going to be attacking Russia? That an Article 5 trigger is going to.
So
Are you literally
so
you
there was the
won't engage
interview-
with this because it destroys the entire argument. You know that
I
will
will.
never
I
happen.
will absolutely engage with this. I will absolutely engage with this. No
Okay,
So
problem.
will NATO
Oliver
invade
Stone
Russia? Yes
has
or
an
no?
interview, has his famous, multi-hour interviews with Putin, where he brings up this exact point. Mr. Putin, don't you know that NATO is just a jobs program for the West? For the most part, it's just corporate welfare. This is never going to be used to attack Russia. Don't you understand that? And Putin says, it may be that way, it may be not that way, but if you're looking at it from our side, as country after country gets integrated into the NATO system, as rocket launchers gets placed, as military bases gets moved closer and closer to our border, we have to look at this again in a realpolitik sort of way. Put it on the other side. What if it wasn't the economic system of the Soviet Union, but the economic system of the Western world that collapsed in 1991? And
very
that
good.
the Warsaw Pact was integrating Canada and Mexico and putting military bases on the United States border. Would the United States, with the Monroe Doctrine in place, ever tolerate that?
Why?
That's
There's no
what we
answer.
have to
I'm gonna wait.
engage with.
I want to, Anna. You can do this, but I have to repeat the question one more time.
Sure,
because
sure, sure.
You'll never get an answer from this. Do we really think that there is a future where NATO countries? We already have nukes in Turkey. We already have the 3 countries up in the Baltics. Like, is Ukraine going to be? That's the domino that we invade Moscow through. Like, is that really a thing you think is going to happen? That Russia's going to be invaded by a NATO country? Why are you just saying random stuff? In
2008
2000, I don't care. I'm just curious. Do you think that NATO will, or any NATO country will actually invade Russia? I don't want to
Let him
quote or a
respond.
news post. Yeah, what is it?
in 2008, Russia said very clearly that the Ukraine and Georgia were red lines for them. Just like any country has to have its things that it's willing to tolerate and not willing to tolerate, like for the United States, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq or whatever. There have to be things that they will say are, tolerable or intolerable. And
Sure,
Ukrainian,
but do you think NATO will
participation
invade
is
Russia?
Intolerable.
Do you think NATO will invade
Do
Russia?
I
or
think-
would?
Do I think
asking you
NATO will
because
invade Russia?
yes, it's a yes or no question. We're asking for the sixth time.
The
the
answer is
current
obviously
political
no. Like we
environment?
literally
Of
have,
course not, of
we
course
got
not.
a phone set up.
So
between
why are
Washington
they
and Kremlin.
expanding all the way up to Russia's borders? Why are they doing drills?
Because
with
when
flags
you're
and
not-
all this shit? Why are they ripping up arms?
Wait, okay, wait, okay,
Why
give
would
us,
they do that?
wait,
Why would they
okay.
put
What a
dual-use
great-
missiles
what a
in
great
Romania and
question.
Poland? Why
What a
are they
great question,
doing the
Bernard.
largest
Let
military
me answer you.
exercises since the
I would-
Cold War all
I
throughout
would
Eastern
love to
Europe,
answer
including
that.
on
I
Russia's
would love to
borders?
answer that.
Why
I would
are they
love to answer
sanctioning
that.
Russia?
I would love
Why
to
are they
answer that.
saying that they're happy
I
with
would love to answer that.
Ukrainians
Okay,
dying?
okay. Please both, thank you, both of you.
Okay.
Stop for a second.
Adam
okay.
is
Wait. Okay.
I
Okay.
love answering things.
And
So,
it's not like
give me
America
a-
doesn't launch aggressive.
Is my mic not on? Can nobody hear me? Okay, sorry.
Prepare
I
yourself
can't.
for that possibility.
Okay, wait. Is my mic actually not working? I can't tell if it is or not.
It's working. I'm just playing
Okay,
I can
Guacamole.
hear you. It's all good.
Okay, it is working. I can not tell. Okay, so you guys were talking over each other, so I and nobody heard.